I've always been careful on my commute, keeping my purse tight against my side, weaving through the rush hour crowd. But that morning, in the split second I glanced up at the timetable, my phone vanished. Stolen. Just like that. My stomach dropped, and a wave of panic hit me. My whole life was on that device. Emails, work contacts, family photos. It wasn't just a phone, it was a piece of me. Reporting it at the station felt almost surreal, like I was describing someone else's bad luck. But inside, I felt hollow, stripped of something vital. By the time I got home, the weight of frustration pressed down on me harder than my work bag. Robert was on the couch, casually flipping channels, looking untouched by the chaos in my day. When I told him about the theft, he frowned in sympathy, but it was quick, too quick. I sank into the chair across from him, rubbing my temples. I hated how exposed I felt without a phone. It wasn't about scrolling or wasting time. It was about having control, access, connection. Waiting days for a replacement? That felt unbearable. That's when Robert leaned forward, almost too conveniently. "You can use my old phone until your new one arrives. It still works fine." I blinked, caught off guard. I'd seen that outdated thing shoved in his drawer before. Clunky, forgotten, practically a relic. Still, I was desperate. "Thanks. I guess it'll do for now. I just need something for calls and emails." He gave me a smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, just don't expect much from it. Battery's not great." His words seemed casual enough, but I couldn't shake the nervous energy behind them. I held the old phone in my hand that night, turning it over like it was some antique dug out of a forgotten drawer. The screen was scratched, the case chipped, but it powered on. That alone gave me a flicker of relief. I told myself it was temporary, just a stand-in until my new one arrived. But as I typed in my email and adjusted the settings, something in me stirred. It wasn't just the frustration of using outdated tech, I couldn't explain it, but the device felt heavier, like it carried more than just data. Robert hovered in the background, pretending not to watch me set it up. Every so often, I caught him glancing over, then quickly shifting his gaze back to the TV. His voice floated casually across the room. "Remember, the battery dies fast. Don't expect too much." I gave him a half smile, not really thinking much of it. But looking back, there was a slight edge in his tone, almost as if he hoped I wouldn't explore too far. At the time, I brushed it off. I was too tired, too drained from the day, to dig into any odd feelings. Still, when I plugged the phone into charge and placed it on the nightstand, I couldn't shake the unease. It was like borrowing a stranger's diary. Familiar, yet not mine. The buzzing of notifications from apps he'd never deleted startled me in the quiet of the room. For a second, I considered wiping the whole thing clean, starting fresh. But I hesitated. Something made me pause, as if the phone itself had a story it wasn't ready to let go of. The next morning, I carried Robert's old phone with me like an unwanted accessory. Its bulk felt awkward in my hand, and every time I swiped the screen, it lagged as if protesting being brought back to life. On the train, I caught my reflection in the darkened window, clutching that relic, and sighed. I hated feeling so dependent, but at least I had something to keep me connected. I told myself it was just a stopgap, nothing more. Yet, the way Robert had handed it to me, with that faintly nervous smile, kept replaying in my head. I tried to shake it off, focusing instead on my emails and texts. But when I scrolled through the photo gallery that evening, planning to clear space, nostalgia hit me. Pictures of vacations, birthdays, little family moments flickered across the screen. For a while it was almost sweet, a digital scrapbook of years gone by. Still, there was an odd heaviness, as if these memories weren't quite the whole story. I found myself lingering longer than I meant to, wondering what else might be tucked away inside this forgotten device. When Robert came home later, he kissed my forehead like everything was normal. And maybe it was. but I couldn't ignore the strange sense that this phone was more than just a temporary fix. It was a window, one I hadn't decided whether to open. I didn't know it then, but that small hesitation, that curious pull, was about to change the way I looked at my marriage forever. That night, after dinner, I curled up on the couch with Robert's old phone resting heavy in my palm. I told myself I'd just clear space, delete old apps, wipe out junk photos, make the thing usable. It felt like busy work, something to distract me from the irritation of losing my own device. At first, it was harmless enough. Family dinners, vacations, blurry shots of the dog in the yard. I even smiled at a few, forgetting for a moment how resentful I felt. But then, as I kept scrolling, my thumb hesitated. There was a folder tucked between albums, its title bland enough not to draw attention. Something about it made me pause. Maybe curiosity, maybe instinct. I opened it, and the air left my lungs. The first image made my stomach twist. Robert, arms wrapped around a woman I'd never seen before, their smiles too intimate, too easy. My pulse thundered in my ears as I swiped to the next one, then the next. Different woman, different night, same betrayal staring back at me. My hands trembled, the phone slippery in my grip. I whispered to myself, almost praying it was a mistake. No, this can't be real. But it was. Each photo was undeniable proof, snapshots of a life I hadn't known existed. Every image felt like a knife carving into me, deeper with each swipe. My chest tightened, my throat burned, and still, I couldn't stop looking. I needed to know how far it went. How long? How many lies had been told right to my face? I scrolled faster, my breath ragged, each swipe like ripping off another layer of skin. There were so many. Different women, different clothes, different settings, a hotel room, the passenger seat of his car, dimly lit restaurants I'd never been to. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't one drunken mistake. It was a pattern, a secret life stitched together behind my back. My throat felt raw, but no sound came out, just the rush of blood pounding in my ears. I clutched the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened, half tempted to smash it against the floor just to stop the images from searing into my brain. But I couldn't. This wasn't just humiliation. It was evidence. Every photo was proof that the man I had trusted, loved, built a life with, was living a lie. My heart raced so fast it hurt, but my mind was already shifting. I wasn't just a betrayed wife now. I was a witness, and I needed to remember every single detail. The walls of the living room seemed to close in, the silence pressing against me. I kept whispering under my breath, "How long? How long has he been doing this?" My whole body shook as the reality sank in. Months, maybe years. My husband hadn't just lied. He'd built an entire facade, smiling at me with the same lips he used to kiss them. My vision blurred, but I forced myself to keep looking. I had to see just how deep this betrayal went. By the time I stopped scrolling, my hands were numb, my face streaked with tears I hadn't even noticed falling. I sat there frozen, staring at the glow of the screen like it was a weapon pressed against my chest. My whole body felt heavy, but inside I was cracking open, piece by piece. The trust I thought we had, the marriage I thought was solid, it all felt like shattered glass at my feet. I thought about every late night at work, every business trip, every distracted smile when I asked him simple questions. The puzzle pieces rearranged themselves into a picture I wished I'd never seen. And suddenly, the little lies I'd ignored over the years didn't look so little anymore. They screamed at me now, mocking my silence, my loyalty. It was as if the phone was speaking, exposing truths Robert never thought I'd find. I held it close to my chest, shaking, but not from fear. It was rage, sharp and cold, wrapping itself around me like armor. He thought this phone was safe to hand over. He thought the past was buried deep enough never to resurface. But he was wrong. He'd given me the very knife I needed, and in that moment I knew I wasn't going to confront him just yet. No, I was going to watch, wait, and make sure when I moved, it would cut the deepest. The next morning, I acted like nothing had changed. I brewed coffee, set his mug on the table, and forced myself to smile when Robert kissed my cheek. But inside, every gesture felt poisoned. His laugh, his little jokes, even the way he asked if I'd slept well. It all rang hollow. My mind kept flashing back to those pictures, each one louder than his words, each one screaming the truth he thought I'd never see. I studied him in a way I never had before. The way he scrolled through his phone, the casual hum under his breath, the careful calm in his eyes. Was he already thinking about her, or one of them, while I buttered his toast? Every movement of his felt like a performance, and I sat there in the audience, pretending I didn't know the script. My silence became my shield, and in that silence, I grew sharper. By the time he left for work, my decision was clear. I wasn't going to rush into accusations. Not yet. I needed to see him for who he really was when he thought I was blind. That night, I called Lisa. My voice cracked as I told her everything, but anger steadied me. I saw everything, Lisa. Pictures. Not one mistake. Dozens. Her gasp was sharp, angry on my behalf. Megan, you can't let him get away with this. You deserve better. I gripped the phone tighter, my voice low and certain. Oh, he won't get away with it. He handed me the knife himself. The days that followed felt like living inside a play where only I knew the ending. Robert carried on as if nothing had shifted. Late nights at the office, text messages he hid with a flick of his thumb, hugs that felt rehearsed. I watched him carefully, memorizing the way his lies slipped out so smoothly, as if he'd practiced them for years. Each word he spoke was another thread unraveling from the fabric of our marriage, and I let him believe I wasn't pulling at the seams. At work, I could barely concentrate. My mind replayed the images, the women, the hotel rooms I didn't recognize. But with each pang of hurt, a sharper clarity took shape. This wasn't about confronting him in a burst of tears. It was about holding the cards close until I was ready to play them. And believe me, I was preparing my hand with precision. Pain sharpened into resolve, and resolve into patience. When I met Lisa for coffee that week, I could see the fury in her eyes before I even sat down. She grabbed my hand across the table. You have to protect yourself, Megan. Don't let him spin this on you. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I know. That's why I'm waiting. Let him think I'm blind. Let him keep digging the hole. When I move, Lisa, he won't see it coming. Saying the words out loud made me feel stronger, as if I'd stepped out of the fog and into the battlefield. At home, I began noticing the little things I'd overlooked for years. The faint smell of cologne on his shirt when he swore he'd been working late. The way he avoided my eyes when I asked simple questions. Even the silence between us at dinner. It wasn't just tiredness. It was distance he'd created long before I ever found those photos. Now that I knew, every detail was amplified, each one screaming louder than his excuses ever could. I became an actress in my own life, smiling when I had to, nodding when he spoke, pretending to believe. Inside, though, my thoughts were sharp as glass. I'd replayed our entire marriage in my head, every anniversary kiss, every holiday, every promise whispered in the dark. How many of them had already been tainted by his betrayals? My chest burned with anger, but I swallowed it down, storing it like fuel. I wasn't going to waste it on shouting matches. Not yet. Robert thought I was still the trusting wife, the woman who would never suspect a thing. He had no idea that I carried his old phone like a weapon tucked in plain sight. He had no idea that every smile I gave him was just another mask, hiding the storm waiting to break. And as the days passed, one thought grew clearer than ever. The confrontation was coming, and when it did, I'd be the one holding all the power. I waited for the right night, the kind where the silence in the house felt heavier than usual. I set Robert's old phone on the kitchen table, face up, like a trap waiting to be sprung. My hands didn't tremble. They were steady, calm, as if my body already knew this was the moment. When I heard the sound of his car pulling into the driveway, my heart beat harder. But it wasn't fear. It was clarity. I was ready. He walked in, jacket slung over his arm, humming some tune like he'd had the best day of his life. When he saw me sitting there, motionless at the table, his smile faltered. "Hey," he said, uncertain. "What's going on?" I gestured to the phone without a word. The silence stretched between us until it became unbearable, and finally, I broke it. My voice was cold, controlled. "Robert, tell me, when you gave me this phone, did you forget what was inside?" He blinked, feigning confusion, scratching the back of his neck like a boy caught red-handed. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone light, but his eyes darted toward the phone too quickly. I picked it up, swiped to one of the photos, and turned the screen toward him. "This," I said flatly. "Care to explain?" The color drained from his face, and in that instant, every ounce of his bravado slipped away. Robert's mouth opened and closed, like words were fighting to come out, but none dared to land. "Megan, it's not what it looks like. I swear." The lie made my blood boil. I slammed the phone down on the table, the sound echoing through the kitchen like a gunshot. "Don't! Don't you dare insult me with excuses. You betrayed me, and you were too stupid to even cover your tracks." My voice didn't crack, not once. It was sharp, steady, a blade slicing through every falsehood he tried to weave. He reached out across the table, his hands trembling. "Please, just listen. I can explain. They didn't mean anything." His words spilled out like a desperate script, one I knew he had rehearsed in his mind, ready for the day he might be caught. But all I saw was the man who had smiled at me while living a double life, who thought so little of me that he left his sins neatly tucked inside a phone he assumed I'd never touch. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the tile, breaking the rhythm of his pleading. "Do you even realize what you've done? You've turned our marriage into a joke. You've made every memory a lie." His face crumpled, sweat beading at his forehead, but I didn't flinch. For once, the power wasn't his to hold. It was mine, and I wasn't about to let it slip. Robert's voice cracked as he stumbled over more excuses. "It was a mistake, Megan. I was weak, but I love you. I swear I do." I stood there, staring at him, and for the first time in years I felt nothing but clarity. No sympathy, no forgiveness, just the clean, cold truth of what he had done. I leaned closer, my voice like ice. Love doesn't look like hotel rooms and secret folders. Love doesn't hide in shadows. He reached for me, but I stepped back, putting the table, and the phone, between us like a barrier he couldn't cross. His lips quivered, his eyes pleading, but it was pathetic. The man I once thought was my anchor now looked small, stripped of his arrogance, reduced to begging in his own kitchen. And the irony of it all hit me. He was ruined not by me, but by his own carelessness. He had handed me the evidence with his own hands. I grabbed the phone, slid it into my bag, and walked past him without another word. The sound of his desperate calls followed me down the hallway, but I didn't turn back. That night, as I closed the bedroom door behind me, I knew the confrontation wasn't the end. It was only the opening act. The real reckoning, the part he'd never see coming, was still ahead. The morning after our confrontation, Robert avoided me like a guilty child. He left early for work, his footsteps hurried, his silence louder than any excuse. I sat at the kitchen table with his old phone in my hands, no longer seeing it as a burden but as my weapon. Every photo, every message, every timestamp was ammunition, and I was done being the quiet, loyal wife who looked away. Now I was building my case. I forwarded everything to my email, pictures, texts, even his pathetic messages calling them darling or babe. With each click, a surge of power ran through me. For once, I wasn't the one left in the dark. I was the one holding all the light, and I was going to shine it exactly where it would burn him most. The betrayal still stung, but beneath the pain, a sharper feeling grew. Control. When I met with my lawyer later that week, I laid it all out on the table. I have all the proof I need, pictures, dates, even messages, I said, my voice steady. He looked over the files, raising his brows, then gave me a firm nod. With this, the case is clear. He won't be able to contest. Hearing those words was like breathing again after months underwater. Robert thought he was untouchable, but his own secrets were about to strip him bare. News travels fast in families, especially when you want it to. I didn't hide what I had discovered. I let it surface naturally, the way a secret always does. A forwarded photo here, a carefully timed word there, until whispers turned into gasps and pitying looks turned toward Robert. Friends he bragged to, siblings he once impressed, even colleagues who admired his devotion. All of them saw the truth. Not from me shouting, but from the evidence he created himself. Robert tried to spin the story, of course. Late-night calls, desperate texts, even a half-hearted attempt to paint me as cold, distracted, too focused on work. But lies have short legs, and his tripped over themselves. No one could argue with what was right there in color, frozen in pixels he couldn't erase. He looked smaller each time he tried, shrinking under the weight of proof he could never outrun. I watched it all unfold with a strange calm. There was satisfaction, yes, but more than that. Relief. I didn't need to scream or beg him to acknowledge the pain he caused. The world was doing that for me. And in every uncomfortable glance he received, in every door that quietly closed on him, I felt the scales tip back in my favor. Justice wasn't loud. It was quiet, sharp, and devastating. The day we finalized the divorce, Robert sat across from me looking pale and worn, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. Mine barely had to speak. The evidence spoke for itself, and every attempt to fight it collapsed under the weight of his own mistakes. He signed the papers with a shaky hand, his jaw tight, his eyes darting everywhere but at me. For once, he couldn't look me in the face. That silence was sweeter than any apology he could have given. Walking out of that office, I felt lighter than I had in years. The proof that once made me tremble in pain had transformed into my shield, my sword, my freedom. He lost his credibility, his standing, even the pity of his friends. And I didn't lift a finger beyond the truth he'd so carelessly handed me. That was the beauty of it. His downfall wasn't crafted by me, but by his own arrogance. I just chose to show the world what he'd been hiding. At night, when I lay down in bed alone, I didn't ache for him. I didn't miss his touch, his smile, his laugh. All of those had been borrowed, counterfeit. What I felt instead was strength, raw, steady, unshakable. He thought he'd broken me with his betrayals, but what he really did was hand me the keys to my own freedom. And I was only just beginning to learn how to use them. Months later, I sat at a little cafe near the park, sunlight streaming through the windows, my brand new phone resting on the table beside my coffee. I scrolled through it with ease, no fear of hidden folders, no weight of secrets lurking behind the screen. For the first time in a long time, I felt light, free. The world outside bustled with people rushing to their next destination, but I was in no hurry. I had my own rhythm now, one no betrayal could shake. Lisa slid into the seat across from me, her grin wide as she set her latte down. So, she said, tilting her head. Do you ever regret opening those photos? I met her eyes, a small smile tugging at my lips. I thought about the tears, the rage, the sleepless nights. And then I thought about this moment, the peace, the calm, the certainty that I had chosen myself. Not for a second, I answered, my voice steady. Sure. I lifted my cup in a quiet toast, the steam warming my face as I whispered the truth I had earned. That old phone wasn't a curse, it was my freedom. And with that, I let the past fade into the background where it belonged, ready to embrace the life I'd built out of strength, betrayal, and the kind of resilience that can never be stolen.